And welcome back to the Fearless Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Lynne, and today I am truly honored to have Aubrey Bergauer on. Aubrey, welcome. I'm a big fan. So excited to get to chat with you today.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yes, your name has been widely spread throughout the arts industry for a long time. People have mentioned you to me multiple times, so I think there's a lot of excited listeners on today. We're here mostly to talk about this incredible book that you've released just over a year ago, Run It Like a Business. And this is so great because the arts world desperately needs business skills and how to make things successful. I love what you mentioned in the opening. You're saying there's no reason why we need to be not successful
Yeah.
as orchestras or arts businesses. Or I run a concert music series, chamber series. So we're here to learn from you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and we can dive in.
Amazing. Well, what can I say? My whole career has been in offstage arts management roles, which now is 20 years. It's so hard to believe. I'm like, okay, here we are.
Wow.
And and I was very quickly, I was trained as a professional musician, have a degree from a top music performance program, and also have a degree in business. And so many people stumble into arts management later. You want to run an ensemble or found something as artistic director, or you decide, oh, you learn later in life, oh, there are these offstage roles. For me, I realized this in high school. And so since age, I don't know, 16, 17, I was like, I want to run an orchestra someday. And fast forward,
Cool.
got the 2 degrees. And now here we are 20 years later with work. Just to very quickly share, Seattle Symphony, Seattle Opera, the Bumbershoot Music and Arts Festival, chief executive of the California Symphony, and then now the last 6 years, chief executive of my own business, Changing the Narrative.
Oh, it's amazing. And I know that you travel and speak pretty much full time. Is that correct?
Full time,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I got the chance to hear you in Rotterdam and I was so grateful to be part of the audience because I know it was a private event. But luckily I could get in there because it was so important for me to be able to hear. And I thought you were just an excellent speaker. I mean, I saw that you've done TEDx stuff, so I see why. But
Thank
just
you.
speaking to this audience that is maybe not used to these ideas, I would love to hear about, yeah, you're sharing how you got into it. But what are some of the concepts that you're bringing to the arts world?
I think painting with a very broad brush, we tend to be in classical music very insular. We're trained so often to do one thing exceptionally well, and that is perform. And no shame in the game. A thesis, I would say maybe the thesis of the book is that our artistic product is so excellent because of that fantastic training so many of us experienced. And so, like I said, no shame in the game. However, and in this day and age, that's not enough. So the whole book is about how do we've been optimizing the product for hundreds of years, literally hundreds of years. And then how do we optimize the rest of the experience, the rest of the business around that product? And that's really what the book is about. And each chapter takes a look outside the arts. What can we learn from the quote unquote business world, for profit world? And the good news is so many of the challenges facing arts and culture have been solved by other industries, like versions of those challenges. How do we grow our audience? How do we keep our loyal customers, we call them subscribers and donors, coming back? How do we develop strong company cultures? All these things that are just, I think, really, I was going to say hot topics, but really urgent topics in our industry have been vetted, tested, solved, proven with these other strategies. And so that's really, I would say, central to a lot of my work over the years. And then the book was just codifying a lot of that of what can we learn from these other businesses who've done it. And then I will say also, it's not just theory. There's also in every
Yeah.
chapter case studies, whether it's work I've done, work with other client organizations and or just other arts organizations I found through my research who are like crushing that particular subject. So I just want to say it's not just theory. This is actual like arts organizations and artists are doing these strategies, and every single time, lo and behold, it works.
That's amazing. Yeah, one of the most compelling things about your speaking, I think, were the case studies that you brought to the presentation. I know you mentioned from the smallest things, like how Duolingo took out the shaming element of the owl because they realized it was turning people off. Can you talk a bit about how you found these like real world business examples and brought them into the arts world?
Yeah, I mean, some of it was, like I said, this has been so central to my work for years now, looking outside the industry, seeing what's working elsewhere and applying that, and then having a lot of success in my own career by doing that. And so some of it, like Duolingo is an example of a case study I had stumbled on probably a couple years before writing the book and had really been following them. And they're so data driven in what they do. And then I realized completely independently, and this is all in the chapter, and you heard me speak about this, when I was running the California Symphony, we embarked on very similar user experience research to what Duolingo did, completely independent of each other. But I realized I didn't even know when we did this that it was called user experience research. So, but it's really literally going to your users, your customers, your audience members, and asking them really about what they feel and what are their pain points. And that's a really different question and approach than a lot of different arts organizations tend to approach their audience research. Oftentimes it's a survey or tell us about your experience instead of really trying to probe, like, how does somebody feel? And when you do that, you start uncovering frustrations. And then those are things that you can solve and address. And so Duolingo, for example, this is here's some commonalities. Mentioned they realized, oh, people feel ashamed with some of the language they were using on the app. And they used to have this line, it was like part of their loading screen, 15 minutes. What is it? Something like 15 minutes a day can help you learn a language. What can 15 minutes of social media do? Or something like that.
Yeah,
And
I
you,
had that pop up come through.
okay. And so
Yeah.
users told them, I don't like that. That makes me feel ashamed. And so they,
Yeah.
that and many other things, they started addressing those issues. Well, lo and behold, at the orchestra, also shaming came up. Newcomers were saying, when I applaud and I don't know, and it turns out it's the quote unquote wrong time, and I get shushed by somebody else in the audience, I feel ashamed. I feel stupid. I feel like I don't belong. And so this is why the feeling is so important. When you start uncovering that those are the emotions that people are experiencing, particularly newcomers, when they come to, in our case, it was a symphony orchestra concert, but we've reproduced this research now with many different genres and artistic disciplines. When you start uncovering those are the feelings, it's like, wow, no wonder we have an audience retention problem. I don't like going to places where I feel shamed and unwelcome either, right? And so
Right.
that's the beginning. That's chapter 1 of the book is like, how do we start to tap into this user experience research, and Duolingo was an excellent gateway to learn about this work.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, to get to know your audience better, were you surveying them, sending emails after the first time that they come? Like, how are you gathering this?
We sought out in this research project, gosh, this was now over 10 years ago, which is also hard to believe. The first one, like I said, we've reproduced it several times now, but we put out kind of the call just on social media. It started off, I think it's like a Facebook post for the orchestra. We want new people who, quote unquote, should go to the orchestra, meaning we said, if you self-identify as somebody who is culturally aware, smart, educated, has expendable income, you do frequent other live entertainment experiences, but for whatever reason, you just don't go to the symphony, we said, we want to hear from you. And the deal we made was we said, you can come to as many concerts as you want in the season. It's $5 each. This was not a money making endeavor. This was a research project. And but we charged $5 instead of free because free has no value. Free has a high drop off
No
rate.
commitment. Yeah.
Exactly. And we wanted people to go through the purchase path. We're like, part of the experience is going online, finding what concerts you want to attend, going through that, selecting your seat, going through the whole process. And so we said, we got to charge something. So we said, not out to make money, just out to do the research. $5, you can come to whatever concerts you want. There was one concert in particular that was required so that there was a shared experience from which we could have basically a focus group discussion. And that discussion is where we really uncovered all of these difficult feelings towards the art form. But I will say, if I can just wrap this up with a positive note, the most wonderful thing that came out of that, I will say it is hard to sit with a group for an hour and hear a lot of these pain points, right? It's so hard to not be defensive and instead to just approach it with, no, this is going to make my organization better when we address
Mm,
these issues. But then at the end, or toward the end, we're talking about the program itself, the art itself, and all these difficult emotions that we had heard. Suddenly, the room temperature shifts, and somebody says, wow, when I heard 70, 80 musicians playing together live, I felt awe. And then
wow.
everybody else in the room is like nodding their head and they're like, yeah, I felt awe. And now this kind of comes full circle to the very end of the book. There's research on awe as an emotion, as an experience. And sure enough, artistic experiences. I mean, now I'm telling everybody things they already know, but artistic experience, research backed, science backed, does elicit these feelings of awe. So here we go. To just put a bow on this, it goes right back to this thesis that the art is not the problem. The art is not what's causing the challenges of our industry. However, there are some real pain points that we have to solve if we are going to grow, period, but bring our institutions into more, what am I trying to say? Just cultural relevancy in 2025.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, I think everyone who have the experience of seeing awe, I think of the Northern Lights, anything that makes you feel that you're not the center of the world,
Yes.
right? Hearing an orchestra, it's a completely new experience for so many people. I've had many people come out to me after a concert and say, "This was my first concert ever. I've been playing with candlelight." So that's a different type of audience than the typical classical
Mhm.
music audience. And that's been such an experience for me to play for people who this is their first time. They have no expectations and they just love it because they didn't
Yeah.
know what to expect. So
Yes.
they're
Yeah,
like, wow, this is so
exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk about the pain points and some of the things that you've solved, can you share more? I mean, no clapping between movements. I know you have a t-shirt that says that, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you selling that as merch? I need that.
Oh my gosh, I was at one point. I can send you the link.
I love it.
Let's see, what else did we learn? We learned things. This goes back to the website. This is the thing. It's everything but the product. This goes way back to people trying to like browse the website and figure out what concerts they want to attend. And this applies to opera, this applies to theater, this applies to dance. I mean, any genre or artistic discipline. But they said things like, "Wow, your website reads like inside baseball." That's a quote. You
Like
know,
jargon, right?
exactly. So we
Yeah, right,
probe, "What do you
right.
mean by that? Say more." And they say, "I feel like there is so much technical language and jargon." Those are the words they use. And it's so funny. I'm in San Francisco, Silicon Valley's right next door, and they're not talking about a tech company. They're talking about an orchestra. And they say there is so much technical language and jargon. I don't know really what I'm browsing. And so the more we probed, it became very clear, and this is true for almost every single orchestra and even opera company, our program pages on our website, our production pages, are a list of artist names and repertoire generally. And they did not understand, this became so clear that every concert is pretty much the same format: overture, concerto, full symphonic work, but they don't know that. They also don't know words like concerto and what that means. And so it was like, whoa, 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 we got to zoom way out and had to really think, are there ways we can talk about what we do without using this vocabulary we learned in music school or growing up as artists? And again, these were smart, educated adults, and so it just became clear that, I realized I had this moment, I was like, we, me included, preach that the decline in public music education, particularly in America, is one of the big reasons why we've seen a decline in our audiences over the last few decades, and yet, I realized I have done nothing, at least at the time, I had done nothing to help grown adults who are now a product of that lack of education fill in those knowledge gaps. And I realize it is on me and my institution. Like, we have a choice basically. We can fill in those knowledge gaps, use different words, try to help educate our audience, or I can stick my head in the sand and say, shame on the public school system. We need to fix this. Rah, 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 rah." And I was like, well, I'm going to choose the former. We saw our audience double over the next 4 years.
Incredible. Can you talk more about this? Because I'm thinking of the snobby classical typical audience member who would be like, "How dare you, for lack of a better word, dumb down our art,
Mhm.
not use the words that it's a concerto is a concerto, right?" So, and I love that you're taking this ownership over, no, I'm going to educate the audience if the public school system can't. But what would you say to the person who's like, well, that person should just go on YouTube and do their research or whatever, any kind of pushback?
This might be the number one question I get. If not number one, it's up there. Like, so many people say, "What about our core audience? What about the aficionado long timer?" Okay, so here I have several things in response to that. Not a bad question, because this is like our core, like I said, our core audience for so many of us. So a few things. One, we found that our core audience also loved seeing the audience grow. We had
Mm,
so many people, and now I've seen this reproduced with so many client organizations, like people, whether it's donors or people just writing into the general kind of hello inbox saying like, "I look around and I see younger faces. I look around performances and I see it looks different than it used to. At my orchestra, it used to be half empty. Now we're selling out and having to add performances. So, and talk about the
Wow.
artists too, it made a big difference in our relationship with the musicians too. But so no matter who you are, I mean, the most knowledgeable people are the people on stage, right? And they were like, no, no, I see it. And then the core audiences too. They were like, wow. So it actually helped, particularly our donors who were like, wow, now I see what I'm investing in here.
Mhm.
So there was that. There are always gonna be some naysayers for sure. So, I tell this story in the book. There was one particular performance where somebody comes up to me, wasn't a donor, at least not a major donor, otherwise I would have known who they were. So I'm guessing a subscriber, and he's kinda wagging his finger at me, and he's like, "I've been coming for so many years, and if you tell people to applaud when they like what they hear one more time, I'm out of here." And I just remember thinking, "We've doubled our audience, like, I'll take that deal. I will trade you for doubling the audience any day." I mean, obviously, I didn't say it that way, but,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just I think we have to be ready for that. I don't want that
Yeah.
kinda crabby bad apple who doesn't even who thinks they're an sorry, here I get on the soapbox, who thinks they're an aficionado, but doesn't even know that actually this whole construct of when to applaud and not is completely a 20th century construct
Yep.
and not even true to the origins of the art. I mean, I was like, "Oh, man, I can get it, Michelle,
Preach.
I'll get on the soapbox real fast." And so I was so yeah, like I said, I'll take that deal any day of the week. I will trade you Buster. So that's that. And then the one other thing I'll say is follow the data because there is a human bias called the law of small numbers. There's another name for it too. I can't remember, but we tend to focus on anecdotes over data. This is true for all human nature, and it definitely plays out in our organizations. Two questions like this, because I worked at institutions before where if that event had happened, we would go back to the next staff meeting or team meeting. Oh my gosh, so and so, Mr. and Mrs. So and so were really cranky because such and such happened, and what are we going to do about it? And it's like, no, no, look at the data, look at the data. It's
Wow.
not about the one cranky person. It's about how much we are growing because we're doing things a little bit differently in service to our community.
Yeah. That's so important, especially as artists, because we tend to be a little bit more on the emotional side and we're very sensitive. So having any kind of negative comment can really affect us. So it's
Yeah.
so good to say, look at the numbers, look at the growth, look at the people who are impressed and happy that there are more people coming. I know every time there's young people in the room, people are like, wow, what are you doing here? Like at my concert series, I had some friends come and he said, all the old people asked me why I was here. And it's like, that's funny, but a little bit sad because it's
Yeah.
like you hope that there would be people our age also interested in this.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are you selling concerts if not by the repertoire? If we're not saying,
Mm.
Mozart Symphony, like how are you bringing in new
Right.
audiences?
So what we heard, and we just did what they told us they wanted. They said, "Why is this interesting?" We said, "Oh, well, because, Mozart was boy genius in this example, or, whatever." We like all these things that we learned years and years ago for most of us. We're like, "Oh, this is why this is cool. This is why this matters. This is why we program this." So just started putting that on our website as bullet points. And that was like the lead on the
Mm,
program page. Like, what makes this concert interesting? And usually it was like three or four bullet points, not a whole essay, just a few quick bullet points. And then what we also let's see a couple things on this. One, talking to the music director, artistic director really helped because, you ask them, why did they make these choices? Oh my gosh, you're unleashing a floodgate of, oh, well, this and that and this and that. And so being able to distill that for the public facing audience, that was an interesting and kind of fun exercise as well. And then the other thing, there were definitely some people, again, smart, educated, some people did want to go deeper. And there was one person in particular in this original focus group who said, I looked up every piece on your season on Wikipedia." I was
oh,
like,
wow.
I know. Yeah, that was my reaction too. Wow. Okay. And what's interesting though is that, and the group said this, most people won't go to that effort. Some people
Mm,
would. They are smart. They are hungry. They want to learn. And then somebody was like, "Hey, could you just link to Wikipedia for us?" That would be helpful because if people leave your website on their own, they might not come back. But we talked about that too. Like, do we want to be linking people away? What's that going to do? And we thought, well, if we're going to lose them anyways because they don't understand what we're saying, we did a pilot test. Let's see. Sure enough, we could see them opening in the new browser tab and then coming back and finishing their purchase. So for a
oh,
while, that's what we did. And then later we did a website redesign I think maybe 2 years later, once we had really tested a lot of these theories and ideas. And in the new website redesign, we just had like pulled in from Wikipedia, so they never had to leave the site, and that resulted in even higher conversion. So, anyways, multiple ways to skin a cat. This is pretty in the weeds, but the point is, yes, people want to learn. They don't want to read. This is a whole separate part of the discussion, but like things written by a musicologist for musicologists, right? And
Yep,
so
yeah.
they were
Even
like,
I don't wanna read
well,
musicologists,
yeah,
like,
they're
I'm
the
like
same, right? But yeah, yeah.
yeah. Would you ever link to recordings? Did you guys test that? Did you
Oh,
let
yeah,
them
we
hear
would
it first?
yes, thank you for mentioning that. We would, embed the Spotify playlist, and
Okay.
usually it was artistic director who was like these were his picks of the recordings that he liked, and so that was really, like, cool, fun messaging moment too to be able to say, "This is what our artistic director recommends if you wanna take a listen."
That's a great idea because then you're giving people previews and probably they won't listen to the full thing anyway, or it'll be on in the
Mhm.
background. And then they're more familiar when they come into the setting.
You got it, yeah.
I would love for you to talk about, well, first of all, how are you capturing new people, like brand new people who have no experience? Is it you're just hoping that they come on the website or are you doing targeted ads? And then also, how are you getting them to come back?
Yeah, okay, yes and yes, all so,
Yeah.
new people, here is what every artist and organization needs to hear. On the whole, we get a lot of new people every year. So this is good news. A lot of what we're doing gets new people to come. The very troubling statistic, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is that up to 90% of first timers never come back. And we say we have a new audiences problem. We need new audiences. We need younger audiences. But the reality is, talking about the data, we actually are quite good at getting new audiences. This is excellent news for us. However, where we struggle is retaining them. So,
Mm,
how do we get new audiences? A lot of what you said is true. Yes, ads matter. I'll just say on the website piece, what was happening is that we were getting, and this anybody can look at their Google Analytics to find the numbers on this, but it's something, and I've seen this with so many clients now too. It's something like 70% of website visitors are new. And I don't mean brand new ticket buyers. I mean never been to yourorganization.org before ever. And when I started, again, going back to the data, when I started seeing that, I was like, whoa. And then see previous conversation of are worried about the long timers. They're the minority of people visiting their website. Plus, they already have their tickets. They're subscribers. So they're actually not going. That's part of the reason why they're not on the website. They have their tickets, they're good, they're done. So too often, artists and arts organizations are designing their sites for the people who actually aren't really going there, or at least the majority of people going there. So that's a whole was a whole eye opener for me as well. So, okay, so that's thing one. New people are coming. New people are definitely coming to our websites. That's why the website experience matters so much if we will ever convert them to ticket buyers. So, sure enough, we saw increase in ticket conversions from our site once we made all those changes. So that meant more new people coming. Ads, of course, help with that too. And then the second half of your question, how do we get them to come back? So yeah, that became a huge that's really what started the user experience research. I was like, if 90% of newcomers aren't coming back, and our orchestra was close to that. It was somewhere around that number that weren't coming back of our newcomers, first time buyers. And that's what sent me down the path of we got to figure out why. So, okay, fixing the experience, that helps for sure. People stop feeling unwelcome and intimidated. Yeah, that helps their return rate. But also more tactically, this gets into a whole chapter on the subscription model,
yeah.
and
Let's jump there right here. This is
yeah,
page 17 in your book.
amazing. We're doing book club here, I love this. So, yeah, so the subscription model, this is another area where I realized there are so many businesses with thriving subscription models, and yet in the arts, we say it's on well, it is on the decline. We say even that it's dead sometimes. Some people say the subscription model is dead, and once I started researching this more, I learned 20% of all credit card transactions globally are to our subscription services, to Netflix, to Amazon, to all the things that we
I
have
think I
on
have
auto.
like 15 subscriptions myself. Like,
Oh, I'm sure
definitely.
we all do,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so, uh, that became like this point of tension for myself where I realized I was like, "What? It's thriving everywhere else and it's on the rise everywhere else, yet in the arts on the decline and some even saying dead." And I thought, "This does not compute. Like, what is going on?" So I went on this deep dive of research on this when writing the book, and it turns out there's a lot in the arts that we do different than what are now kind of normal best practices. And that alone can really that just changes how we can interact with our subscribers, renew more subscribers. I mean, we can go down this rabbit hole as much as you want, but there's
I
a
wanna
lot to
hear it. I
say.
wanna hear yeah, yeah, the specifics of it because 'cause I'm looking through, like, giving them all the value that they deserve, giving them the second type of content that was super interesting. I'll just
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, we can hit all of this. So, okay, I'll start with first timers because we were talking about them. So, this is, I guess, maybe lesson one. You have to segment your data because not all audiences are the same. Hopefully, everybody who's been like kind of nodding along. Yeah, the newcomers, not the same as the aficionados, not the same as the longtime subscribers. Okay. So, you have to segment your data. There is not a one size fits all message. And so often that's what ends up happening. So, for example, somebody comes to, and anybody listening, you can like raise your hand wherever you are if this has happened to you. You go to an arts organization, and if you buy a ticket, then what happens? You get solicited for a donation, you get invited to the gala, you get the subscription brochure in the mail, you get solicited for the postcard for every concert coming up after that, right? And it's like we bombard our newcomers with all of these different next steps, all of these different offers, and it's very confusing. So that's a lesson. So I said segment your audience, and then I guess part 2 of that would be and then tailor the offer. So for first timers, we said the only thing, if 90% of them are not coming back, the only thing we want them to do is come back. And so that meant no subscription solicitations, no donation solicitations, no gala invitations. We're only going to invite them back. And there are multiple ways we did that: email, postcard, all kinds of things, letter on their seat. But no matter what you do, it was more of like the strategy of, nope, that's the one next step and one next step only. We were able to get our first timer retention. If 90% is the national stat of who doesn't come back, that means 10% are the ones who do. We got that up to reliably 30% of newcomers at any given performance we knew would come back within 12 months. That's a lot of money, no matter the size of your organization or budget. So that right there with that one audience segment, that makes a difference. And this is why retention is so important. So I'll talk about subscribers more in just a moment, but I just have to say, because some people even say, well, what does it matter? Could we just sell more single tickets if we have fewer people subscribing? Yes, you can, but it is way more difficult to make revenue goals and fill the seats if you don't. And
Mm.
so for anybody who has a product that's super high in demand, maybe the candlelight concerts are an example, maybe they don't have to have subscribers because they're so popular. But for any organization that's not bursting at the seams with demand, retention really matters to making your organization sustainable.
So
So,
subscribers meaning someone who buys for the entire season and
yes,
gets
or
6 tickets or
even a small package, but yeah, some
okay,
version of buying in bulk, essentially.
okay,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So then now this goes back into subscription economy. So then the next big alarming statistic is that nationwide, at least in the US, nationwide, 50% of first-time subscribers, season ticket holders, do not renew. So when I was researching the subscription economy, membership economy, it's also called, in some ways this tracks. It is always, always true that the first renewal period, whether that's your first month of Netflix or your first year and a year-long subscription, in our case, the first season, always true that that's the hardest period to renew. Okay.
Mhm.
However, if you get people over that hurdle, they are so much more likely to stay with you for years to come. So there's a lot of money on the table there. And then for us in the arts in particular, once somebody is a second year subscriber, so renewed after that first year, they're your top prospect, the data shows, for donations. So when we're
Mm.
talking about how do we bring people on an audience journey from that first interaction with the organization to their first ticket purchase to returning to then eventually becoming a first time subscriber to then eventually renewing that subscription. That's why it matters, because it's I now say, I didn't have these words when I wrote the book, but now I say patron retention, audience retention is like compound interest. It gets so much better and so much more lucrative for us. So you mentioned like the different types of content and the strategies. So just to very quickly name a few, is for subscribers, I would say maybe number one thing that we can do is have a better onboarding experience. This is what I learned. Better onboarding means better renewals. And so often arts organizations put so much effort into the renewal period. I've been there where it's like, let's send out another brochure mailing. Let's send out another brochure mailing. Let's send them another email. And the reality is move some of that money to the front and of their and make their onboarding, and it doesn't even have to be a lot of money, it can be emails and things. It's not necessarily expensive to do, because for most organizations, onboard this is true for donors too, by the way, but I'm talking about season tickets here. So for most organizations, the onboarding is a confirmation email, maybe a ticket mailing. That's kind of
So
it.
someone's just bought like 6 tickets to your season and you say like, "Here's your confirmation of your subscription. See you at the first show." That kind of thing, right?
Basically,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
that's what happens a lot, and so, especially for somebody who's a new subscriber, like, we need to roll out the welcome wagon, and so, it's, "Thank you so much," like, we originally changed our back at the California Symphony, changed our order confirmation to, like, a GIF of people jumping up and down, and, like, "We're so excited," and, like, really tried to tell them, like, "This is awesome that you took this step." And then that goes into the next bit of research on this is reinforce their decision. They've just dropped kind of a lot of money. I mean, that's a very
Mm,
subjective statement for a lot of people, but they dropped some money, let's put it that way, more than
yeah.
they would on a single ticket because they bought multiple performances. And so then we have the first job we have to do, this is true for any subscription brand, you have to combat essentially buyer's remorse. And so reinforce the wisdom of the decision. So that's why like the energy is needed, telling them like, oh, you made such a good choice. And then it's all the benefits that we use to sell the tickets in the first place, free ticket exchanges, whatever else we said, keep your same seat next year if you want, or all those types of benefits, remind them. Like you are
Mm,
now first in line if you want to renew your seats next year. You're also subtly saying renew your seats next year. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so, anyways, reinforce the wisdom of the decision. You want them to feel good about it. So, all of that is part of onboarding. Then, after that, second type of content. This one I thought was super interesting. So, Netflix knows if they can get any of us to a second type of content, we are more likely to stick with our subscription for longer. Second type of content, meaning if I subscribe to Netflix because I want to watch some documentaries, they know if they can get me to watch true crime, a rom-com, and just a comedy in general, anything else that's not documentary, I am way more likely to stick with that subscription for longer. So that is part of the reason why the recommendations, they want them to be tailored to the individual because that's also smart, but also why a lot of times the recommendations are you might see some things similar, but then you also might see, oh, this other thing that's a different genre. So the same can be true for our arts organizations. And some organizations really silo their programming, particularly orchestras, where it's like, here's the traditional classical over here. And if you like the Beethoven, you might like the Brahms. That's not wrong. But then there's also siloed over here, the pops and or the movie concerts or whatever. And there's very low cross pollination. And so that's one way to do it is to try to go to different content types. The other way to do it I like is multi-channel. So follow us on Instagram and see us live in the concert hall. That's another way to get people literally to a different content type, different platform. So this is another one where there's multiple ways to skin a cat, but getting outside of this mentality of like only the traditionalists, only like the traditional stuff. Um, Not necessarily true. And the more we can help people, I might join Netflix because I really like documentaries, but if they can help me see that, oh no, there's a lot of other good stuff here, that's better for my retention rate. And I will just wrap this up by saying we have the ability as organizations and particularly as excellent artists to deliver all of that. And I think the way we tend to silo all of that programming and even like almost segregate it is really a disservice to actually retaining more people because it showcases the incredible breadth of what our artists can do. And I think we should celebrate that and embrace that. And it's actually a selling point, not this like siloed programming approach that we've had for so long now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love this description of the onboarding experience. I read something similar in a book where they were talking about the first day on the job and that they put in a ton of energy and intention towards a new employee at the office. And again, the retention rate was way higher. They made sure the coworkers came over and introduced themselves. They made sure that they had a free lunch on their first day. Somebody was there to show them around the office. This is from a book by Chip and Dan Heath.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like how to get them to be loyal to your company for many,
Oh,
many
I
years. It's
love
all
it.
about that
Yeah.
first touch point with you. So, yeah, if somebody's going to give 6 times a ticket price to you, you want to make sure that they feel what you said, they've made a good decision and that you're excited.
Yeah. 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 There's okay, one more thing just because I can't help myself.
No,
People
I
make
love it.
make people make their decision on whether to return or not something within, like, the first 30 minutes of their arrival. And so for most people, they haven't heard a note of music yet. What the first 30 minutes is finding parking and getting their ticket scanned and dealing with the ushers and trying to find their way around the hall and, and it's and reading the program book and maybe standing in line at the bar, right? It's like all these things where it's like, "Oh, wow, they're barely hearing the orchestra tune at this point at 30
Yeah,
minutes
yeah,
in. So
yeah.
anyways.
No, it's amazing. As an artist, I mean, I know many people listening have their own projects, so there's so much I can hear everybody being like, we just wanna practice, we just wanna play, so it sounds like we just need to keep building teams around us. I know for my chamber music series, I have great people standing at the door. I personally have started walking out before the concert to, like, thank people for coming or welcome
Awesome.
people or whatever, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm also like, well, now everyone's seen me, so that kind of ruins the whole, like, artist entrance or whatever, but at the same time, like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It matters that I have connection with the audience and thank them genuinely. And I also try to stand at the door when they're leaving so I can at least shake hands and be like, "Hey, thanks so much for coming." Show appreciation that way.
Yeah, I was just gonna say afterwards is a great example too. I mean, it matters that people have a good first 30 minutes in this example, but yeah, if artists, because I know this is maybe a tricky one. Some artists, like, need to be in the zone, don't really wanna be social beforehand, that's okay. And I've worked with institutions before where we made, like, kind of meet and greet pre-show a choice, like, I think that's fair to the artist. Some are like, "No, it's fine, I wanna be social, I'm out and about," and that's okay too, of course. And then some don't want that, and that's okay, but, I'm totally a fan of after party, call it whatever you want, but I'm like, "Yeah, let's get people out there really meeting the celebrities after the concert." Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. That's really helpful. Okay, as you were doing this work over the last, what, 10, 20 years, and you started to bring in these business concepts to the arts world, did you have like a light bulb moment when you were like, this is working?
Oh, yes. I'm trying to think, was there a singular moment? I think no matter what I've tried, I because there's so many different strategies and tactics over the years, I'm very data driven, if that's not clear yet.
I love it. I love
And
it.
part of why I'm so data driven is because I learned very early on in my early 20s, my ideas not gonna get me very far. I need evidence. And so, part of it's my nature, but part of it is realizing if I'm gonna make the case, you better know the numbers, girl. So, I say that because that's really what has, I think, spurred so much of this is, early on, I'm trying to think, like, 2006, I remember being maybe 2007, I remember being at the Seattle Opera and making the case for starting social media channels, right? This really dates me, and now it seems so obvious. How could an organization push back against having social media channels? But at the time, that was
I
the
mean, some still do, so
innovative
you're not
thing.
so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I remember pushing for a mobile-friendly website back then too, and, all those things, and, like, at the time, it was I mean, I went all the way up to the CEO, and I was having to make the case, and there was so much pushback, and I say that not to throw shade, but to say, like, versions of that are true now, versions of that will always be true. So the I don't know if there was a singular light bulb moment, but it was always something like where I'm like, "I see this thing working in other industries." At the time, so many brands already had social media channels, right? And so, things like that, and I was like, "I think I see an application to our work that how that could help us." That's usually how I think it almost always starts, and then the other thing I'm a big fan of is a pilot test. We do not have to, like, spend a lot of money to try a new idea. I'm actually against that. I'm a big fan of how do you this comes from Jim Collins, Stanford Business School, but fire bullets before cannonballs. And so, how can we test something on a small scale with very little money, very little resources? If you're back to Silicon Valley, we call that minimum viable product is another way to say that. So that's really important too, that we do not have to, like, go sink or swim. That's actually not how change is made. Also, Chip and Dan Heath research, coming back to them, change is made in small doses, small increments. So is there a singular light bulb moment? I don't know, but just these little many moments over time where I'm like, every time if I can test it, measure it, see the success, then that is really what has spurred me on to keep going.
What is something that surprised you? You didn't think it was gonna work, you shot a few bullets, and you're like, "Oh, I'm not sure," and then it turned out to be a big win.
Let's think. Wasn't sure. I would say, okay, I've got a couple that I can think of. One is some of this retention work, I knew we could be more strategic. I knew we could be more, tailored in our offers and who gets what message. That part I felt really confident about. But the idea of we're going to wait to solicit people for a donation until they're a second year subscriber, still to this day, that's usually when the fundraising people are like having a heart attack. Like, what? And in CEOs too, like, what? And I was in the CEO chair at that point, but I just remember looking at the numbers and then really digging in and I give this advice to any organization today too who's having that heart attack moment. Go run the numbers. How many first time buyers are actually converting to donors? Some is probably the answer. And then what dollar amount is attached to that? Because it's usually like the $20 gift, not the $2,000 gift, right? Because they're new. And so usually once I started digging into that, and usually as the case as it plays out, it's like, oh, there's actually not that much money attached to that group. And if we instead work on getting them to subscribe, for example, and then eventually donate later, first of all, their first gift isn't $20 at that point, it's 200 or whatever.
Right.
I'll take a
Right.
10x increase in somebody's first gift, you know? So, but I would say that was one where it felt a little counterintuitive or a lot counterintuitive, and then I was like, saw it bear out and now have seen it bear out for the last 10 years of this strategy working for organizations.
I mean, in a real way, you're just taking the general principle of know, like, and trust and applying it to your audience. Like, hey,
You
you
got it.
know us, and then you're going to like us because you come to a few concerts and you see that the standard is the same excellence every time. Now
Yeah.
you trust the experience and you're willing to invest in this.
Yes, that's exactly right, and that's the holy grail because this is now like another kind of, I don't know, another issue or another just thing we see in the art so much is, yeah, we tend to sell. This goes back to like selling the program. We sell this artist or that Beethoven piece or whatever. And instead, if we build a brand where people trust us, people are like, Aubrey, do we need to program more Harry Potter in concert or more Beethoven or more Brahms? Can we not champion the composers we want? And I'm like, no, 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 no. It's exactly what you're saying, Michelle. Like if we build a place where people say, I trust you. I know I will learn something. I know I will have an awe-inspired moment. I know I will come away feeling good things.
Hmm.
That's the holy grail, and that liberates us in terms of programming as well.
It's amazing. I mean, there's so much that you've shared already, but I do want to touch on mindset because I know that that's one of the main things we come up against also in the freelance artist is scarcity to abundance. So I'd love for you to talk a bit about like how have you helped to shift this mindset in our industry?
This is the other biggest question I get, I would say.
Ew.
So so you're hitting all the top ones. So, okay, it's what will our core audience think, and then this overcoming scarcity mindset. So what do we do about this? There's so much research on this too. I think it goes back to trying things on a small scale for sure. Realizing that, yes, we might be afraid or fearful of will this work? Will this not work? Can we try something new? Can we not? If we look at the data, we know if we keep doing the same things, we know what that result is. We see that graph, we know what that line looks like. It goes down. Whether that's a financial graph, an audience graph, a subscriber graph, like we know that's what it looks like in our industry. So that's thing one where it's like we have got to give ourselves permission to try it differently because clinging to what we know, that is human nature, clinging to what we know and what is familiar and comfortable. But what is familiar and comfortable is a decline. And at some point, that's not sustainable.
The decline that we all complain about, by the way. Classical music
Exactly.
is dying. Nobody comes to the concert.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's comfortable, right? Like we all
Right.
can recite those lines. We know because we've been there. And it is human nature, but also humans, our brains are plastic. Neural plasticity is a whole thing. So it's like we can change. The whole science of change is really what we're talking about here. And so start small, test it, measure it, see how it goes, iterate. We haven't talked about that yet. So many times also we think if it's not a home run out of the gate, if we do not try the new thing and it is instantly successful, it didn't work. I've been in so many conversations where, oh, it didn't work. I'm like, well, okay, hang on, hang on, hang on. Is there
Yeah.
any indication? Sometimes that's true. Sometimes we tried it and it was like, oh yeah, nope, we're done. And then sometimes it's like, is there any indication? What if we try it and switch this little thing or adjust this other thing? And the good news about our business is what we do is so cyclical. We have another concert next week. We have another concert next month, another performance. Or if you're an artist, you're developing your season, you're doing one gig and then another. I mean, whatever. Just we're so cyclical in what we do. It actually really helps this iterative approach because That is the nature of our business. So that's in our corner. And then the other thing I would say on scarcity mindset is I think maybe just reiterating what I said before, we try to just like shoot for the fences, do the home run swing. You know, what's the saying? Like, shoot for the moon, you might hit the stars, or, whatever that kind of saying is. And it's like, that's just actually so not what the research shows. And I think that's great news for us. And to realize that no, growth is possible. We have so much evidence. I have 600 clients now, or who over the years, and it's like, okay, like these are individuals and organizations who have said, I'm gonna try it. Some with extreme fear and trepidation, but I'm gonna try it. And so now we have this like growing body of people saying, like, I believe it. And that's when there really starts to be some momentum with going from scarcity to abundance of, oh, yeah, the proof is in the pudding. We see it. So and I hope that helps. I think this is never easy. Overcoming scarcity, again, it's what we know, it's what's comfortable. And yet at the same time, human nature is amazing because we can literally rewire our brains and form new neural pathways, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think the proof is the evidence that you are bringing. So I just want to thank you so much for this amazing book, and everybody go get your copy, run it like a business. And also, just to your point of try it once, it doesn't work, give up. Well, like we're musicians, so we know that that's not how we approach our instruments.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that because I love this analogy, and I didn't bring it up today, but I use it a lot where I'm like, "No, musicians are the best at this. We practice, we iterate." Like, yes, so thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course. So I think that'll help anyone listening who needs to try some new things. I know that I'm going to be taking so much of this and applying it to my concert series. So thank you. Hopefully, I'll have a sold out season and I'll call you in a year and I'll say
Love
it
it.
worked. If there was one action point that our listeners can do from today's episode, Aubrey, do you know what it would be?
I would say get the book. We've talked about it. If people have listened and thought, "Yeah, this sounds interesting," or "This sounds like it could be helpful," please take that step. Go buy the book, aubreybergauer.com/book or Amazon or wherever you buy books, it's there. But, it's just been really amazing to see the response and how actionable people tell me it really is and helpful to them.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it's got a great cover. Run it like a business. We love bringing these principles into the arts world. Aubrey, thank you for what you're doing for the arts world. You're making a huge impact, and you've definitely impacted us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, everybody, make sure you go follow Aubrey on all the channels, get her book, and we'll see you on the next show. Be fearless.